host of the Downright Upright Show, airing right here on AM 950 radio, Saturdays at 5 p.m. Join me as I dive into captivating conversations with people from all walks of life. As a proud member of the LGBTQ community, I celebrate diversity and beyond with unique stories that make us fantabulous. Please join me every Saturday at 5 p.m. or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Support for Native Roots Radio comes from the Walker Arts Center. Visit during free Thursday nights. Every week from 5 to 9 p.m., there's something new to explore. Enjoy date-friendly events like artist talks, performances, and exhibition openings, or explore art making, open library hours, and exhibition tours. Settle into your weekend among community. Free every Thursday night and free every day for members and citizens of tribal nations. Learn more at walkerart.org. Again, that's walkerart.org.
Hi, I'm Peter Solak.
And I'm Adam Ostrowski.
We are here at Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces to talk about the joy of live fire cooking. Cooking over a live fire is the oldest and most basic form of cooking.
What's new is in the way fire is handled and its heat is managed.
It's easier to experience and enjoy the smell and taste of food cooked over a live fire.
Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces sells and installs live fire grills, fire pits, and ovens. Let us help you experience the smell, the taste, the fun of cooking with fire.
Pizza was first made and is still best made in an open fire oven. The radiant and conductive heat of a live fire is unmatched for wood roasting and baking artisan breads too.
Come see the many ways you can cook over a live fire.
Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces has over 35 working wood and gas units on display at the corner of East Franklin and Riverside Avenue in Minneapolis. More information at woodlandstoves.com. Find the fire that works for you. Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces. Out of the ordinary products and services since 1977.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy, but with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
With a look at your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Tonight, cloudy with a low of 19, then Wednesday, sunshine with a high of 22. Cafe Latte is unlike any restaurant you've ever experienced. Grab a tray and pick from their award-winning selections of soups, salads, sandwiches, and mouth-watering desserts. Cafe Latte, Victoria Street and Grand Avenue in St. Paul, or cafelatte.com.
Portions of Native Roots Radio may be pre-recorded.
It's a good day to be indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Couldn't cut, any cut again.
Because all the hippies were trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings that wounded me.
I am awake.
Welcome to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade, which means distant thunder. Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. You are listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. Hey, we discuss local, national, Native news and events, and as you know, Chujunk, Native issues are human issues, and human issues are Native issues.
Yes, you are right, Dega. This portion of the show is supported by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Well, I like to bring that up and do the intro the same way to hear you just say I was right. So I'm right once a day, and that's good to know. And we have a really, I always say this, but we have a really exciting show today. And our friend Leah Lemm, that I have not seen and we look up to here, and you're a real pro, so we have to really be on our good behavior here, Leah. But I just want to give you a quick intro here and then get right to it. Leah Lemm is a senior editor with the Minnesota Public Radio, leading the Native News Initiative, and you are a radio host, producer, songwriter, singer, citizen of a Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and your work revolves around sound, music, voice, community story sharing with the mission to amplify Native voices. And that was a mouthful, but I know you do more than that. Welcome to Native Roots Radio.
Thank you, Robert.
Yes. Hey, we're here to talk about your documentary, but I just also just want to just start out by saying you do so much great work for the community, amplifying our voices, and you've been doing it for a long time. And I remember years ago I was on your brother's, you were in your brother's show, and we had such a great time. I'm sure you edit out a few things I said, but I appreciate it. You lost their minds, I think.
Sometimes that's necessary, but yeah, thank you so much, Robert. I think I have such a joy, in doing this work, and I also look up to you.
Oh, that's probably because I'm just a few inches taller than you, but I appreciate that.
I always forget that until I see you out in the real world.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I just want to know, how did you first get in? We're going to talk about your documentary, but I want to talk about first, how did you first get into storytelling and writing for MPR and Native News?
Well, this is my favorite long and winding story because nothing is ever a straight line, right? I grew up always loving music, not liking public speaking, however, but mostly music, singing, playing instruments. I played the violin, I played the piano, and I started making songs, as a young kid and writing little poems. So kind of over the course of college and things like that, I really explored more when it came to songwriting, singing, and recording of those things. So I became enamored with recording voice, whether that was through singing or speaking. So more of the oral tradition direction. And so I actually am a Boomerang employee at MPR APM. And I was first there for several years doing work behind the scenes in broadcast operations. And so I was doing the technical side of things, which is so fun, and spent a lot of time listening, right? So a lot of this work, as much as we love talking, and I can go on here, but as much as I love talking, most of the work is listening. And so I spent a lot of time listening to the airwaves, whether it was NPR, whether it was other, news outlets around the world, Canada. And I noticed kind of a lack of Native voices. And so it kind of spurred something in me to try to remedy that at least a little bit. And so I kind of set out on my own and did a bunch of freelance work, studied more about creative writing, did my MFA, and just really dived into Native storytelling, journalism, oral tradition, and just conversation, really, with that hope to amplify Native voices and just to be able to hear our voices on the airwaves more and more.
Well, and I agree. I love radio too, because it's the theater of the mind. And that was an old quote from the old radio I listened to years and years ago on WCCO at night when they would do the plays. That's how old I am. Okay. Hey, but we're talking today about your experience producing your documentary, also finding Manoomin, a search for the spirit of wild rice. And first of all, what a beautiful story. And also your voice is just awesome in narrating and talking about your story. I really appreciated that. How did this come into fruition?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So this kind of is the part of the story where I become that Boomerang employee back to NPR News. Is I was having conversations with folks at NPR about exploring water, like the significance of water, and how to get into the conversation about water. And what came to mind was wild rice and my own for lack of a better word, I guess, failure in knowing a lot about it. I knew I liked to eat wild rice. I knew I liked to cook. And yeah, that was about it. That's the end of the list right there. But I knew there was so much history and so much meaning and things like that behind Manoomin, our Manoomin relative. And so I thought, what a nice way to explore the ideas of how we are, as Ojibwe people and a lot of times Native people, interacting with our environment and having a different form of relationship with, what we consider relatives, as far as plants and animals and water. And so I started working on this project through MPR News. I started on it before I was hired back. It was only a few weeks there in between, and then transitioned full-time into my role as senior editor with Native News at MPR News. And so this was another project I got to work on in parallel with my work as an editor. And so really, it started out, like I said, as this exploration of what is Manoomin? What does it mean to my community, with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe? And kind of discovered more opportunity for exploration, I guess, in that, because what I thought was going to be a simple, hey, let's look at migration. Let's look at, what does Manoomin mean with the Goodberry? Where do we go? What's the process of, the sticks and the poles and the canoes? It led me to a conversation with my own family, like talking with my dad, Bill Primo, about our own history with interacting and being a part of cultural traditions like ricing, which we weren't growing up. And so we had that conversation in the documentary as well.
Well, you also, it's a family affair too. I was going to bring that up, and your son's involved too. And I can't wait to grill you more here in the next segment here.
I look forward to it.
Right on. Hey, we're here with Leah Lemm, and we're talking about finding Manoomin, a search for the spirit of wild rice. And what a great title. And I'm excited to get on that next, right after this commercial break. I know NPR doesn't have commercials per se, but we have to pay the bills here. We'll be right back. This is Native Roots Radio.
Unwanted sexting or photos, inappropriate jokes, even tickling or wrestling can feel like a violation. Catcalling, cornering, or groping, getting them drunk or high for sex, recording sexual acts without permission, hurting someone because of their sexual orientation, raping a family member, a child, a date, a friend, a stranger, purchasing a human being for sex. You make the choice every single time. Sexual violence is many things. Make a choice. Do not do it.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
The city of Minneapolis is now on Native Roots Radio with Minneapolis AIR. AIR stands for American Indian Relations. Guest host Christine McDonald talks to people about important things affecting the city's Native communities. Minneapolis AIR dives into topics like public safety, public health, elections, and so much more. Tune in to Minneapolis AIR on Native Roots Radio from 5 to 6 p.m. on the second Wednesday of every month, right here on AM 950.
Signing up for $1 bus and train rides with the Transit Assistance Program, or TAP, is quick and easy. Do it straight from your computer or phone by uploading one of the pre-approved documents listed at metrotransit.org/TAP, along with a copy of your ID. They'll mail you a go-to card with a full year of discounted rides. For questions or translation help, call 612-373-3333. That's 612-373-3333.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States.
And 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected.
Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf.
Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy.
As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired.
Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl. Howl!
welcome back to Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
This portion of the show is supported by Native American Community Development Institute, or NACD, in Minneapolis.
Hey, we are here with Leah Lemm, and we are talking about her documentary, Finding Manoomin, A Search for the Spirit of Wild Rice. And before we get too far into this, let our listening audience know where we can find this.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you can check out when it comes to the documentary, and it can all be found on mprnews.org/wildrice.
I like how you did the visual.
It's a personal reminder to myself, whoop, there's a slash there. And what's fun also on the website, besides the full documentary, which is about almost a half an hour long, is a letter to the audience. And I also spent, in the documentary, you'll see me cooking, you'll see me interacting with my kid, things like that. I've included a quick and easy recipe for Ojibwe fried rice, which involves thick cut bacon. So obviously it's delicious. And since I'm a radio person as well, I also did an hour-long audio companion, which you can also check out on mprnews.org/wildrice.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back and listen to that. Hey, I don't know if you know this, Liam, but my son-in-law is Ojibwe. So as we're Ho-Chunk and the people of the Sacred Voice, but my son-in-law is Ojibwe, and I really I like him. So I want to hear, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the migration story of the Ojibwe people? I brought that around.
Yeah. And what's fun is my kid is in 6th grade. So he actually had a unit on the Ojibwe migration, and he told me about it earlier this year. So that was kind of fun. But, we originate kind of in more of the Northeast Canada area. And there was a prophecy or a dream that says, you need to start moving west, and at some point you will come across food that grows on water, and this will be your indication that this is where you should live. And so there are several different spots along the way, I think 6 or 7 different locations where Ojibwe folks settled according to that prophecy. And so one of them, and for our people, for the Mille Lacs Band, we went to Mille Lacs. So that's kind of how people came and moved west. And what I love is I visit in the documentary the Mille Lacs Indian Trading Post, Mille Lacs Indian Museum and Trading Post, and speak with Travis Zimmerman. And he gives a good overview, and there's a lot of good information there as well.
I think it's a beautiful story, where food floats on water and you found wild rice. And I just think that's beautiful. Can you tell our people listening about the significance of wild rice and what that means to Ojibwe people?
Well, and that's kind of what this documentary explores, right? Because I can only assume so much, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit of a story that didn't come across in the documentary, but I did talk about in the audio companion. Is not long after I went out ricing with the crew, Pat Cruz and his family, my uncle passed away. And, we all got together at the community center, and we're, getting our, the food ready and, ceremony. And Michaela, who's also in the documentary, nudged me. She's like, Leah, the rice dish here was harvested by Pat Cruz. So the person that I went out racing with was the person that provided a lot of the wild rice for the ceremony. And so I found it this I found it to be this lovely, like, connecting through line among community, among ceremony, that I knew in ceremony there with this food, that this food was gathered by somebody local, somebody who put thought and care into the process of ricing. And so when I think about what it means to the community, I think in what I discovered is that it brings people together. It brings family together, it brings community together, and shares the love that went into the process of harvesting and preparing wild rice and cooking wild rice. So it really is this like glue, this adhesion that helps bring people together.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. And I know you're an artist too, a beader, and there's a prayer within every bead. And we talk a lot here about asking people who made, if you're going to buy something like that, who made this, because there is so much community, like you say, with wild ricing involved in our art too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this energy, this sharing of energy, positive energy in it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. What else would you like to talk about? I just, I told you in the chat I'm nervous because you're a pro and I'm here 8 years on the radio. I'm still stumbling around, but I really appreciate you coming on. What else?
Yeah. Well, you know me, just make the mic hot and I'll just take it from there. No. But I do want to share that one of the most significant learning moments for me in the documentary is how open and willing people are to share those traditional ways with others, with people who want to learn. Because, as a newbie, when it comes to wild rice, like, I'm not going to be good at it. Who would be good at it? I try to learn Ojibwe as I can. I try to learn other, artsy things that I try and fail at, right? That I want to stress
Jessica, before we get to talking a little bit about cannabis, this segment goes really quick. I'd like you to be able to talk about anything you want because we'll probably have a good 3 to 4 minute conversation about that.
I think the biggest thing that I am talking about with folks is just the importance of being involved in politics. Like, there's so many people who are really upset right now about the outcomes of the election and feel like it doesn't represent the majority of our country. And that might be true, but our elections say otherwise. And we have to stand in that light and accept that for what it is, and then kind of live in the world as it is while we create the world that we want. And so right now, that means addressing the issues as they come up, working on what's realistic and pragmatic in front of us, and then planning for the future and thinking, what do you want to see out of politics? A lot of people don't get involved because they just think, we've all heard it, like, politicians are all corrupt, politicians are all this, just a bunch of rich people. Like, that's not my experience. And I know I'm a bit of the anomaly in that, but I'm a single mom and one of the only single moms in the legislature. I only live on my legislative salary. I teach part-time at Metro State outside of that. And we don't make a ton of money. And so I don't think understanding that not everybody got into this work just to make money. And a lot of people actually don't have the privilege of making a lot of money while doing this work, that it's kind of double-sided. We've got folks who drive in many hours, whether it be from Moorhead or from Duluth area, or we have testifiers that are coming down from any of our tribal nations that share geography with us that drive a really long ways to engage in government and to be part of that solution. And so while I understand the stigma about politicians and what politics has become in a large, kind of icky way, we also do have really great people in politics who are doing really great things and want to hear from you and want people to be involved. We are all a bunch of nerds, absolutely. So like people think like we don't care about those issues, but like that's exactly what we do care about. We nerd out on public policy and finding solutions. So whether it's one person facing the issue and like the solution wouldn't cause harm, let's do that. Even if it does feel like I'm the only person in Minnesota going through this, you're probably not. And we can tell you at least what's going on with it and see if we can't help create some change. But we are here to help in a certain way. And I'm not saying that as we, the government, we as people who are sick of watching the government work the way it works, who went and got inside, we want to hear from you so that we can work alongside you and share our power with you.
Amen to that. And I know, Jessica, State Representative, that your door is open during session. People reach out to you during that. I've seen you a bunch of times when I've been up there wandering around, and you have an open door session with your constituents and people that believe in certain things. And I just say bravo to that.
Thank you for that. I mean, my cell phone number is something I've given to everybody. So it's there. People can call or text me anytime. That's the number that's on my legislative profile. My email address, I look at those. I see the messages that come in, especially when they're custom written messages and not form messages. You know, those always, I see those. Making sure that folks know, like, my address is on all my campaign materials. Like, that's questionable sometimes, I think, as a decision, but you know, I have a great great relationship with local PD and very loud pit bulls, so it helps. But it is I try to be accessible, right? I'm a regular person. I'm a mom. I eat, you know, sparsely on a low salary. You know, I live paycheck to paycheck, and I talk about that because it's something like 3 out of 4 people live paycheck to paycheck. And this idea that we're supposed to like feel ashamed of it and not talk about that. I have 2 degrees. I'm working in the field that I'm educated in. You know, the reality is that public service isn't for the money. But for a lot of people who are working for the money, they're not getting it, and they're struggling to buy groceries, and we're struggling to buy these things. And I'm in that struggle right alongside so many people. And so I know what that's like. When I'm advocating for my own experience as much as I am for so many other people. So trying to break some of those stigmas down. And I think my cannabis work kind of reflects a lot of that, right. You know, just talking about something that people were too afraid to talk about in the spotlight often. And I don't know, I just think if we're less fake and we stop the theater, there's so much political theater. I just think that the public will want to be involved in more and feel like they can be involved more. But if we just continue to act like it's a place for the elites, and if we act like you have to act a certain way, dress a certain way, be a certain way, think a certain way, that's not going to create the bigger tent. And I think that's what my party's doing, is we're creating a bigger tent to say, how can we bring in more people into just civics? I ran the model legislature at the Capitol last couple weeks ago, and that was the most powerful thing I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen that Metro State's model legislature right out of St. Paul, we ran it at the Capitol on December 5th and 6th. Their social media's got more about it, but bringing kids into this and so many other things.
Well, let's talk about, you know, you were ahead of the curve when we were talking about cannabis and medical and legalizing it. Let's talk a little bit about your journey and also where we're at today.
Yeah, so I got into cannabis legalization because I found that cannabis was very healing for me. I had quite a traumatic childhood, and so having complex PTSD was a hard thing to treat. You know, I tried all the pharmaceuticals, and I've been through tons of hours of therapy and group and individual and all the different things, while also being like a very high achieving, successful woman. And so that stigma of like, but look, you're so successful, and knowing I still didn't feel great about it, that's where cannabis kind of filled a gap for me. And it's different for everybody. Some people are in pain, some people can't sleep, some people can't eat, some people just like to enjoy it. You know, everybody has their own relationship with the plant. But for me, that's what it was healing. And so it helped me find my voice in what I actually love to do, which is policy advocacy. And so we got involved, and we just lobbied local government, got involved with our local party stuff, kind of worked our way up and began to just be seen, right? The world's run by people who show up. So we just kept showing up everywhere we could. From there, I helped my House rep get elected. And then eventually he, like after a year or so, he decided he wasn't going to seek another term. And I was kind of shocked. And I said, what are we going to do? And he said, I think you should run. And so that I ran for office. And so my advocacy predates my election. But then once I got elected, I started to work on all of that. Now we have legalized it. We've ended prohibition. August 1st, 2023, it no longer became a crime to consume a healing plant in a peaceful way. And we threw the big event at First Avenue to celebrate. You know, it was really magical for me to stand at First Avenue and see like the police kind of protecting the line, like the block that we had blocked off. And as everybody within their line was freely smoking. And, you know, I've heard from people who are like, thought I would never see this in my lifetime. And like, that's why I got into this, was to just make sure people could consume in a safe and healing way. That's really today where we're at. It's really kind of transformed. I think like we have short memories, so we sometimes forget some of the things that happened in the past, but we expunged everybody's record. We are resentencing anybody with a felony conviction. We are allowing anybody that's got, you know, it used to say that you couldn't work in the cannabis industry if you had any crimes other than cannabis crimes, which I felt like that was prejudicial. And so we amended that before we passed the bill to make sure it was more broad to more people, but did also still keep us safe from white collar crime, human and labor trafficking, and other real like kind of kingpin style crimes. And so we drew that line and threaded that needle really well. So I think like we forgot about all that stuff that's happened. You can't lose your job anymore just for smoking weed on the weekends. Like don't smoke weed at work, but like you can't lose your job. Your kids are not going to get taken away simply because you consume cannabis in ways not around them. Like you cannot expose children to it. That's still true. But like, you're not going to risk losing custody of your kids because you were out at a friend's house where there were no children consuming cannabis, right? When you're safe with it, it's good. So today we're kind of in this business side of things. So we're launching licensing. We're getting into that. So the few people that think that they have what it takes to run a cannabis business in Minnesota, those folks are stepping up to try to do that. And that's the licensing piece that most people are most interested in. So there's definitely great information on the OCM's website about that. There's a new timeline that's been rolled out. I think we're on track as far as like timing goes. And that's really exciting for me, like where we thought we would be. And that's where we are today. So we had some stuff that happened with the social equity pre-approval lottery, which I have a lot of feelings about that, which is probably a whole episode. But where we are now is still on track, and it is still a good situation. And we were able to remedy some of the problems that we had with like people who paid like their life savings to apply for this. And how could we get their money back and make sure that that got back to them? And the office made that decision to make sure that they could do that. So there's a lot going on, though.
Thank you so much for coming on. We got to get you on again. Native Roots Radio. We'll see you tomorrow.